In 2024, I introduce you to Shelve It or Scrap It, a monthly reading challenge where I read randomly selected books from these stacks on the floor of my library. The goal was to get all of the books from the floor onto my shelves or scrapped into my unhaul pile by the end of the year. We started 2024 with 70 books in the stacks, but despite shelving 35 books and scrapping 57 books throughout the year, holding 64 less books than in 2023 and thus making a positive dent in my own TBR as a whole, we actually ended the year with one more book in the stacks than when we started. So in 2025, I have to up my game. The rules remain the same, but I now have to read the same amount of books per episode as I've hauled in the previous month, so that by the end of this year, I will hopefully reach my ultimate goal of getting all of the stacks off the floor and into a proper home, either on my shelves or on somebody else's. In episode 19, I shelved 3 books and I scrapped 5, and we are going to be starting episode 20 with 32 books in the stacks. Hello my guys, welcome to Shelve It or Scrap It, the vlog series where I try and get these stacks of books behind me onto the shelves of my library through any means possible, usually through a process, of course, of reading them and deciding whether I'm going to be keeping them or whether I would like to unhaul them. Now obviously we are 20 episodes deep into this thing, so if this is the first time you're encountering Shelve It or Scrap It, I will put the full playlist in my description box so you can get caught up on the chaos and join us for episode 20 fully informed. But I left you on episode 19 at the end of episode 19 just a couple of days ago at the time of filming this, and I told you guys that I was unsure what theme I wanted to go with for episode 20. So the two options what I was deciding between was a second Spookopoly episode, because we're still in the spooky season, or whether I should mood read, which is something I've never done before for Shelve It or Scrap It, but also something that I have also just generally never really done. Like, I never read something because I want to, even if I don't have something lined up on a TBR. I usually go for, oh well, I need to read this in a few weeks anyway, or I should prioritize a sequel, or there's this really old book on my TBR that I keep thinking about reading and never do. I never pick up something purely just because I want to. Once again, because I can't do anything just because I want to, I didn't know which of these two ideas to pick, so I put a poll up on my Patreon and I asked my patrons to decide. Now the results were very, very torn. For a long time it was flip-flopping between the two, but we have landed on mood reading for an episode, which is really interesting when you see what I've picked, because once again I haven't really gone with my mood, but I digress. We'll get to that in a second. So as per the rules of 2025 for Shelve It or Scrap It, I have to balance the amount of books that I read for these episodes with books that I've hauled previously in the year. Now I've been on a couple of trips this year, each one has knocked me behind a little bit with filming these episodes, and so we're not quite in sync of where we're supposed to be. And I did haul a lot of books in summer. Across July and August I hauled 21 books, so we decided that we were going to be doing 3 episodes with 7 books instead of 2 larger episodes to cover these 2 months, and this is the second episode covering July and August. The main things that happened in July and August, because I know if we're talking about July specifically, my unboxing that I did wasn't that big, but the problem was that I went to a Penguin Michael Joseph event where I think I brought home another 6 books, which is also going to be relevant to the first book I'm picking up for this video. So I ended up with 10 books in total for July and then 11 for August. We're now 7 books deep. We're now going to be covering books 7 to 14 to account for that haul. And as I said, we're mood reading, but I am not only not technically picking a book because of my mood, but I'm also cheating a little bit for this first one. I know you guys are gonna allow it though. You were very supportive when in episode 19 I read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires for absolutely no reason other than I wanted to, and I've been meaning to read that book for a very long time. But the book that we're going to be starting this episode with is quite a chunky one, and it is at the time of filming, an upcoming release. When you watch this book will already have been released, but that is Firstborn of the Sun by Marvelous Michael Anson. Now, this is not a book that was in the stacks, but it is also not a book that was on the shelves. This has lived exclusively on my TBR cart because that is where I put the arcs that I received so that I can kind of see them and filter them up into my monthly TBR when they are about to be released. So technically these books are kind of exempt from the challenge because they're just waiting for me to read them normally throughout the months. But this month, I don't think I'm actually really going to pick anything up off my normal TBR. I think I just want to blast through the episodes of Shelve It or Scrap It because I'm enjoying the little bit of spontaneity that this is giving me at this time. Even though, like I said, for this one, I am going to have a little bit more free reign of what I pick. Let's see if I actually do manage to pick things because I want to, or whether I'm working through some kind of internal system to choose them. But I feel like this is especially fitting because the reason why I have to read so many books across these 3 episodes is partially because I hold Firstborn of the Sun by Marvelous Michael Anson from the Siren Summer Party hosted by Penguin Michael Joseph that I attended in July. So I feel like it works that I'm picking this up now. Also, the main reason why I have decided that this is going to be the book that we're starting with is that from the time, once again, of me filming this right now, this book is released in 3 days. It's released on the 23rd of October. And unless I do include it in this episode of Shelve It or Scrap It, I'm probably not going to get to it anytime this month. And as it's released this month, I would kind of like to prioritize it. So this one is an epic fantasy. I'm not actually sure whether it's adult or young adult. I think that it's going to be published more in the adult space, but I don't think that it's necessarily going to contain anything that would be unsuitable for young adults. So I feel like it's going to be more of a crossover fantasy. And I'll be honest, I have started this and that's what I've gathered from the first 120 pages that I've read. Like I said, it's a couple of days since we ended episode 19, and knowing that I was going to be going with the mood read theme and this being such a chunky book, I thought I may as well just make a start. But this one is following a young woman who lives in this world where everybody has this like sun magic except for her. Her father is a coward. He's somebody who turned away from the gods, which means that he willingly gave up his magic. However, our main character was just kind of like born without it, and her best friend, and also potentially the boy that she's in love with, which is definitely what I'm gathering here, is the prince. But in this world, the order of succession is a little bit different. So they have high priests that come in as regents, and then the firstborn child of the high priest is who becomes the king. And then when the king has a child, they're just like a prince in name, which is what this guy is that our main character is best friends with. And after that king dies, then they choose another high priest so that the power can't stay within the same kind of lineage. And the main character's best friend, who is this prince with a very strong magical ability, has been called to the order to train to become a priest and potentially a new high priest. And this normally isn't done because obviously if you're feeding princes back into the order, that invites the potential for them to become the high priest, who will then become the regent, and then their child would then become the ruler. And that's supposed to be something that isn't allowed. But our main character also really resents the order because she thinks that they were responsible for the death of some of her family members. So when she finds out that her best friend is going to be initiated into this order, kind of against his will, although he is a little accepting of it because he doesn't have a choice, she decides that she needs to break him out of there as fast as possible before he can go through the painful like power stripping ceremony that will allow him to become a priest of this order. So I'm only 100 pages in, which is a little bit under where I like to bring us our first update for Shelve It or Scrap It. So I'm going to read another like 70 to 100 pages before I bring you my more detailed thoughts on this so far. As of right now, I'm enjoying it, but I'm not like 100% absorbed. I do think that at this point, 120 pages in, I feel like we're only just getting started. So the first 100 pages, I felt like nothing much happened, and I'm excited for the pace to pick up slightly or for it to get a little bit more interesting going forward from this point. This week has been one of those weeks that feels like a month, and as a result, my reading has definitely taken a hit. I went to a gig. We went to see Coheed in Cambria on Monday, which was all fine, well and good. Obviously, driving back to and from Manchester is tiring, so Tuesday was a tired day, and then since then I've had 2 appointments every day between Wednesday and Friday. It's now Saturday and I'm filming today because I haven't managed to do any work any other day. And outside of all of that stuff, I've just been feeling very, very overwhelmed and sitting in my overwhelm and trying to decompress, and I haven't really managed to do much productive. So obviously because of that, I haven't been reading very much. I have still been reading throughout the week, but in like 30 to 40 page segments a day. So I've made it like quite a chunk of the way through. But because my reading's been so disjointed and I've kind of been a little bit all over the place, I haven't really felt like I have anything constructive to say about this book. And I'm also kind of sad about it because I feel like my enjoyment of this one is being impacted by how scattered I am. And while I don't mind reading slowly, I used to read, like before BookTube, I'd read like 30 books a year instead of 100. So I used to read a lot slower and still enjoy what I was reading. But now I feel like if I'm dipping in and out of a book and it's been like 5 days and I'm still reading it, I feel like I don't want to read the book anymore. That being said, I'm not DNFing this one, mainly because I do think that I am a big part of the problem with this, but I'm not as, let's say, invested in it as I would like to be at this point, 309 pages in. I think a big part of why I'm maybe not connecting to this is the romance within here, because our main character of Law is in love with her friend. He's the son of the king, so he's a prince, but like I said, that doesn't really mean anything in this world because the kings are replaced by the high priests, and then it's the children of the high priest that become the next king. I think he's called Alawani. I've talked about this before, how when there is a pre-established relationship in a book that predates the book, it's hard for me to root for it because I want to see this relationship form. I'm also finding the main character to be a little bit impulsive, and I don't care so much about her motivations. Once again, we do have this kind of predetermined relationship, so there's been years of trust and like love and friendship built in these years that we haven't seen as a reader, but I'm seeing her kind of go out of her way in a desperate attempt to save this boy. Like there is a blood oath that is formed in here that I feel like she kind of barrels headfirst into. Honestly, it's the actions of a desperate character, which the mindset that she is in at the time that she's making these decisions very much tracks, but it's just very hard to read somebody who is essentially kamikazeing her entire life. Like she does not have the magical ability that would allow her to fit in with this world. There's other stuff going on as well, in that her father deserted the Holy Order and so he is a coward. It reminds me a lot of Spencer in Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, in that because he is a coward and a deserter, she has kind of been branded the same, and they are not afforded the privilege of regular citizens of this society because of that. But then she also has this magic or lack of magic that she's hiding, which further sets her apart. So as she's not allowed the privileges of the regular members of society, there are some people who have been interacting with her in private because they maybe don't necessarily believe that the rules in this world should be as harsh as they are. And she burns a lot of bridges throughout the beginning of this book, obviously thinking quite desperately and behaving quite erratically, which makes sense within the context of the book, but it is difficult to read watching somebody make terrible decisions that are greatly impacting everybody around her with kind of no care for them. She has a single-minded focus on this boy, and like I said, I don't care that much about the relationship between them because it's not something that I've seen blossom and develop. So she is frustrating me in the way that she's throwing everybody under the bus in her single-minded pursuit of saving this boy from the stripping ceremony that will initiate him as part of this holy order. I do feel like this could do with some extra material. Obviously, this is a advanced reader copy, so they don't always come with things like maps and glossaries. However, they do often come with empty pages that say, like for example, this one says dedication to come. So you have an indication that there is going to be further material there, even though it isn't currently included. And you normally have pages like that in place of things like maps, glossaries, dramatis personae, all of that kind of thing. I think I would have really benefited from a family tree in here, because from the prologue where we see this woman who gives birth, and the child that she gives birth to is a girl, she is about to declare that child as the firstborn child of, I think, the high priest, but there is another one of the high priest's wives also giving birth, and she like holds back, something happens and she doesn't end up declaring this child, and somebody else is declared as the firstborn instead. I am going in assuming that this prologue is about our main character Law, so I know that she is then the sibling of a different character in this book. It is multi-perspective, so we don't just have Law and Alawani. There are a few other characters as well, including the current heir, the high priest's eldest son. But I would really love some sort of like family tree, because we have a little bit of a different hierarchical system in this world, where it's not the children of the kings that become the next king, it's the children of the high priests. So I'd like something that just kind of like laid all of those people out for me to make it easier to follow who is connected to who is the heir, who is the prince, who is the king, who is the high priest, and all of that kind of thing, to help me follow that element of this book a little better. It could benefit from a glossary. I'm doing okay without it. It would make it a little bit easier to follow if we did have one, but it's not the end of the world that there isn't. But yeah, I'm having an okay time with it so far. I'm not massively disliking it, but I'm definitely at like over halfway through this book. I'm not so completely lost in this book that I'm desperate to continue. So I know I said that I wasn't going to DNF Firstborn of the Sun, but I do think that I may DNF Firstborn of the Sun. I feel like I just had such a stilted in and out of this book when I was reading it that I've kind of lost the thread at this point, and I don't think that I would be able to pick it back up and become invested without significant work on my part. And while I was enjoying this book, there was nothing in it while I was reading it that was making me excited in a way where I feel like I want to put that work into become reinvested in this book. So unfortunately, I do think it is going to be a DNF. I am going to kind of soft DNF it for now. And we all know that I don't really do soft DNFs. When I decide to put a book down, very unlikely I'm picking it back up. But at this point, I was just kind of like really unmotivated to want to pick this book up and read it. And so I did decide to pick up another book from the stacks, which we'll talk about in a minute. And if after finishing that book, I feel so inclined to dive back into this, I may pick it up and give it a second chance, because I do feel like it's just kind of like circumstances, wrong book at the time kind of deal is what has made me want to put this down. I read like a lot of it as well. I'm 348 pages into it. But then also, if I'm not enthralled at this point, we should also kind of be giving it up. So we'll put this down for now. I'll give it till the end of the episode. We'll see what happens throughout the course of this episode. But getting into book 2, like I said, I already picked the book up. It is from the stacks, and it is The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. Actually, let me just get it, because there is a reason why I decided to go with this one. I decided to pick up The Hacienda because I received a little PR package from Solaris Books this week that included the possession of Alba Diaz, also actually with some really nice dark chocolate, which I'm really excited about. It's actually chili chocolate with chili, cinnamon, and chili flakes. And I'm very excited to dive into that as well as the book. So thank you very much to Solaris for sending this my way. I really like the synopses, like the ideas of Isabel Cañas's books, but obviously like I haven't read anything from her yet. So because this has now been added to my TBR, which was a 2025 release for early October, I thought that I would give The Hacienda a try, because this one is a gothic. I think all of Isabel Cañas's books contain romance. I think that this is more like a suspense or a horror. It is heavily inspired by Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is one of my favorite classics and also one of my favorite movies. And yes, I'm talking about the black and white version, like the Hitchcock version, not the new one, which I refuse to watch just because the Hitchcock one was perfection for me, and the way that the black and white, because it was made as a black and white movie, the way it encapsulated the tone of Rebecca, like the book, chef's kiss, thought it was beautiful. So I don't want to kind of tarnish that at all. But yeah, that's one of my favorite books, which has drawn me to this. It was also compared to Mexican Gothic, which I didn't enjoy, because that one, while it starts off as like a Gothic horror, does add a different horror element that I don't particularly enjoy. But so far so good with this one. It reads pretty quickly, which I was surprised about. I do find that with Book of the Month books in general though. Saying that though, I forgot that I still haven't put a bookmark in this, but I think I'm up to chapter 11, which is about the 100-page mark. And this is about a woman who marries a man because I think her father dies. I think that there's a lot in this book that ties into like Mexican history that is going a little bit over my head. There is a lot that I do not know about, what is this time period? Because it's also like historical. It's not set in present day either. It's the 1800s. So I don't know a lot about what was happening in Mexico in the 1800s, but I feel like what is being talked about here, I'm pretty sure it talks about like the Spanish Inquisition. So I feel like the topics talked about here are like things that were super integral to Mexico back in the 1800s, and like a Mexican audience would be so much more familiar with the intricacies of this that I am going into it. But essentially her father was killed, and so she had to go and live with her uncle, and her aunt was very unkind to her, and so she puts herself in the path of this like rich, eligible, not bachelor at all actually, because he has been married before and his wife died under suspicious circumstances, but she doesn't really know very much about those circumstances. She just knows that there was a first wife and the first wife has died. So she goes to this big mysterious mansion and weird things are happening. Like as soon as she arrives, she finds like a dead mouse on the drive, but it's not like been eaten by a cat or something, you know, like its neck's been snapped. And then the man that she's married's sister's like, oh yeah, the cats are super brutal. But then the longer she stays there, she realizes like she hasn't seen a single cat, and it seems like the sister and like the woman who is responsible for running the house and like the head of the household staff are aware of the weird happenings in this house, but nobody is willing to kind of communicate with the main character and tell her what is going on. And I think that things really start to ramp up when her husband goes away for like a work trip and she's left alone with these people who don't really want her there, and the house is acting up at the same time. We also have another element in here, which is a character that is a priest, and she calls for the house to be exorcised, and the priests aren't really paying any attention to her because she's just like a silly woman who's hallucinating ghosts. And one of the priests in particular does. Now, because I know that all Isabel Canya's books I've heard have some element of romance, I'm wondering whether the romance is going to be between the main character and the priest. I would assume so, because he also has a perspective, and unlike in Rebecca where the main character genuinely does fall in love with her husband, I feel like in the Hacienda the main character was more looking for an escape from her life and also a little bit of a step up into a more comfortable life, and that is why she chose to marry this man. But so far so good. I'm having a good time. A lot easier to read for me right now than Firstborn of the Sun, guys. I have not read a single fantasy in October. I've read a horror. That's as close as it gets. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. This is the third fantasy book, I think, that I've DNF'd this month. I need to get my mojo back. What am I going to do if I can't read fantasy anymore? That's literally, I would say, like 70% of my library. So I am in the end stretches of the Hacienda now. I think I have less than 100 pages left. I'm like 200 and something pages into it, and I am really enjoying this one. It's reminding me a lot. I know it's compared to like Mexican Gothic and Rebecca. Definitely get the Rebecca comparison, but it's also reminding me a lot of Dowry of Blood in the themes of this one, which are very different from the themes of Rebecca. It's kind of like both of these stories start the same, but the things that you think when you're reading Rebecca are the things that are actually happening in here, whereas Rebecca kind of wraps everything up a little bit differently and goes in a different direction. But it's also reminding me of Maria's perspective in, oh my god, what is it called? Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, which I think I read it recently. Was it the last episode of Shelve It or Scrap It, or was it? No, I think it was the one before. And Maria was my favorite perspective in that one. I think that the comparison to Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil is both the attitudes of our main characters towards the situations that they're in, also their motivations. Like they both seek out a rich and influential man to marry to seek out a better life for themselves in a time period where women do not have a lot of freedom. And also I think that the time period, while there's 400 years between them, I think that Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil starts in the 1400s, maybe the 15, whereas this one is the 1800s. Even though they're a little bit different, I feel like societally and the way that women are treated, like I said, it does feel very familiar. I really like the prose in here as well. It's definitely leaning into the Gothic romance elements, and I was right in thinking that the kind of situation we have building in here is between our main character Beatrice and a priest. Obviously, because of both of their stations, she is a married woman and he is a priest. It's not like a full out romance, but it definitely leans into the like pining and longing that I associate with gothic romance. In terms of the type of horror that this is, because it is kind of like a haunted house situation, I actually said recently, maybe it was in my spooky season wishlist video that I did, I was talking about maybe a Darcy Coates book, and I said I didn't really know where I stood with haunted house books because I haven't read that many. The only one that I can really think of off the top of my head is The Haunting of Hill House, which reminds me actually, something else that this is reminding me of is Bly Manor, the TV show that is in the same kind of wheelhouse as The Haunting of Hill House, Midnight Mass, The Fall of the House of Usher, all shows that I really love. But I think atmospherically this is reminding me a lot of Bly Manor, especially with this like haunting element and our main character trying to kind of exorcise the house and get to the bottom of the haunting and why the house is haunted. And our priest actually also has a personal connection to this house as well, which is why he is the person that kind of believes our main character and is willing to investigate with her. So in terms of my feelings of haunted houses, we all know that I don't really like paranormal in terms of romance because I don't like the conventions of the genre, but I actually feel the more that I read, and this is throwing it back to the book that I read for the last episode of Shelve It or Scrap It, which was the Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. That is a thriller that has a paranormal or supernatural element that isn't really explained, which is something that I typically do not enjoy in thrillers. Hamilton, are you well? I know you want dinner, but you have 15 minutes yet. Stop complaining about it. That is not something that I typically enjoy in my thrillers because I like them to be like very well wrapped up, and having unexplained elements just really doesn't do that for me. Although I'm a lot less critical of like the thriller suspense genre than I am of fantasy. If that was in a fantasy novel, it definitely would have resulted in maybe like a lower rating of the book. I think what I'm coming to terms with is that because a lot of the points of paranormal or supernatural stories is that they just are, like, because they're set in the real world, but there's no explanation for why hauntings happen. And to be honest, in terms of am I a believer, I'm not a believer, but I've never had any paranormal experiences myself. And so I'm one of those people, right? I don't disbelieve in things, but unless I have proof, I'm not necessarily a believer. I do definitely believe in like spiritual energy and karma to a degree and like kind of good vibes. I think it's just good to live your life with good intentions, and maybe the universe will feed that back. Maybe it won't. I've had a rotten year, if I'm being honest, which has made me question like whether I have been putting good energy out into the universe because I'm not like receiving it back. But once again, like I'm not hard and fast on any of that. It's not like I live by those rules. I just think it's like good to try and manifest good things for yourself, because positive thinking can definitely affect your outlook. Like if you dwell too much in the negative, which I have a tendency to do, then it obviously like can make you a lot more pessimistic and unable to see the good in things and only see the bad. So all that to say, I think when it comes to paranormal and supernatural stories, because there's no necessarily logic and you have to take things on faith, like for this to be plausible, you have to believe that hauntings exist, that bad energy in houses, bad events in houses manifests in something like paranormal entities or like haunted houses. And I'm not sure that that is like, I don't necessarily mind it, but I don't think it's going to be kind of like a buzzword topic for me in the future. I think I'm discovering that haunted houses, like I don't mind them, but they're not necessarily my favorite. And I think if we talk about like The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which is a book that I read and really didn't enjoy because of how it uses things like run-on sentences to create some kind of like ethereal frenzy and not really knowing like what is reality and what isn't. You have an element of that in haunted house stories where it's like you're seeing things that aren't really there, like things are more like hallucinations than they are reality, and that's not something that as a reader I typically like. I like more like logical, tangible things. So yeah, I'm learning something about myself as a reader during this. I'm not enjoying it. It's not going to be a 5-star for sure. And while I'm not necessarily going to hard swerve away from haunted houses like I do with some other themes and topics and genres, like no mushrooms, please. Mushroom horror, absolutely not for me. I don't necessarily think it's one that I'm going to be seeking out, but I definitely like the gothic atmosphere in here that is like partially because of the story, but also because of the prose as well. I'm really enjoying the writing style. So I finished the Hacienda and I did enjoy this one. I would give it like a 3.5 to a 4-star rating. I especially liked the writing in here, the prose, like the way that this lent itself to the atmosphere. And I think that in terms terms of this being a gothic novel, like a gothic horror, gothic suspense, I feel like it 100% checks all of the boxes. It did remind me very much of like a cross between The Haunting of Hill House and also Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. To its credit, but also to its detriment, because Rebecca is a book that I really love. The Haunting of Hill House is one that I don't enjoy quite so much, and I think the mashup of the two styles didn't 100% work for me. Like, obviously I gave it a pretty high rating, I enjoyed it overall, but I think because we employed a lot of those like ethereal, hallucinogenic kind of haunted house elements in here, it wasn't necessarily the story for me. Now, I am still very excited to read more from Isabel Cañas because I do still love me a gothic novel, especially one that has a romantic thread, although in terms of the romance, I do feel like the priest perspective was well executed in terms of the longing that was conveyed through the language in his perspective, especially when he was talking about the main character of Beatrice. But I didn't really root for it as a romance. I believe that all of Isabel Cañas's books, as I've said, do have a romantic element to them. This one was not at the forefront for me. It's not the thing that I enjoyed the most. My favorite thing was definitely the writing and the atmosphere, and like I said to you guys in the last clip, I don't know if haunted houses are for me. Still not enough to turn me off the topic completely, but not one that I'm overly enthusiastic about reaching for in the future. So I think I'm going to scrap this one. I was down to the end what I was going to do with this, because I thought if it ended really well, like if it had a very, very solid ending, then I could have shelved this one. And the ending definitely wraps everything up in a very satisfactory way, which I really enjoy, but I feel like it didn't do anything special for the ending of a book. It just brought things to their conclusion. And actually, if I'm being nitpicky about it, I think it went on a little bit too long. We could have drew this to a close a little bit sooner. So then I once again was very lazy and didn't want to update you guys because I finished this quite late at night. I've been alternating between like reading a chapter and playing a game of Dead by Daylight because I finished the Fortnite Battle Pass. The season starts very, very soon, and by the time you see this, the new season will have started. This is like a complete side tangent. Not going to buy the Battle Pass for that because I don't care about The Simpsons, but this one was like the Fortnitemares one. Completed all of that, so I started playing Dead by Daylight, and I had I've played Dead by Daylight before. I just fall in and out of it, but I had a very relaxing evening switching between my book and my game. And then it was time to go to bed, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna grab my next read. It is Halloween today on the day that I'm filming, and I was like, what is a good book knowing that I'm going to be reading it on Halloween? So obviously you can go one of two ways. You can just go for the vibes, like the spooky vibes, or you can go for like horror. And because I've just read a horror, even though it wasn't like the most horrific, because it was more about the gothic atmosphere than, I don't know, gore, although there was quite a bit of blood in that book, I decided to go for the just general Halloweeny vibes, and I picked up The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I got this from the shelf that's actually behind the stacks, which is just like a miscellaneous bookcase of just random things. There's like a theme to the first like 3 shelves, and then anything below that is just like overspill. So there's no rhyme or reason why this was on this shelf, and if I do choose to shelve this when I finish it, it would be going on a different shelf anyway, so that's absolutely fine. I'm a little bit of the way into this. It does read very quickly. I'm on page 76, and I think it's about 315 in total, and I am enjoying this, but it's not that it's falling flat, it's just not really gripping me right now, because this feels like a less sinister version of The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. It's following this woman who is a witch in the society. It's set in our real world, but there are a small amount of witches. It's quite unusual to be a witch, and they stay isolated. They don't really associate with each other so that they can stay hidden and stay protected. And they're all also orphans. Like the majority of witches' parents die. And our main character was adopted by another witch after her parents obviously died. She was a very like absentee kind of parent. And this is mainly because of the way that witches kind of avoid each other to stay secret. And her guardian, I guess, was like providing care for another witch, but obviously couldn't have so much of a hands-on role because of the way that she felt about how witches should live and how they should associate with each other and how they should be protected. But our main character obviously has a little bit of a complicated outlook on her childhood because of that, and she herself flips from place to place. She doesn't really stay anywhere for longer than 6 months, but she is contacted. She makes witchy videos on YouTube, but she thinks that people aren't going to know that she's a witch because it's just like, you know, the witchy aesthetic that a bunch of people do. And she is contacted by this guy who has 3 magical children that he doesn't know how to educate on witchcraft because he is not a witch himself. And it's a very similar situation to our main character, Mika, where these 3 children have been adopted by an elder witch and she's never around. And so she has a bunch of people who live in her house, like the woman that runs the house. There's like the gardener, the gardener's husband, the guy who like runs the library in there. And they have all taken up kind of like a guardianship for these children, educating them on a variety of like different lessons, like maths, English, languages, gardening and stuff like that. But they have no idea how to educate these girls on magic, which is becoming a problem because as they're coming into their powers, they're like malfunctioning a little bit because they don't really know how to use them. And the main character, Mika, is called in, and because she feels like this is a situation similar to how she grew up, she decides to step in and help them. So it's very much like Given, the House in the Cerulean Sea, where this woman kind of like reluctantly turns up. She's from a position of being quite lonely. She can't lay down any roots because of the way she's been told that she like has to live. And I assume she's coming here and she's going to fall in love with these children and this house and not want to leave, and also learn about like things like found family and an alternative way to live. I'm enjoying it. It does just kind of feel like a less dark version of The House in the Cerulean Sea right now, which is fine, but that genre, like cozy stories, typically not my favorite. Sometimes they do really work for me, like The House in the Cerulean Sea, but whether this one works for me, because they don't all, I guess we'll find out. Good morning. Excuse my eyes for watering. I've just put eye drops in. I've actually just started getting myself ready for the day. I'll be honest though, it's Sunday, so this is about as good as it's gonna get. We have the sweatpants on, and I want to do a lot of reading today, starting with finishing the very secret society of irregular witches, which I am 262 pages in, so I have about 55, I think, pages to go. I'll be honest, I'm not having a great time with this one. It does still seem just like a less dark version of The House in the Cerulean Sea. And I mean, overall, The House in the Cerulean Sea is a cozy, heartwarming tale about somebody who's lived a very lonely life, kind of finding a found family and like working through their trauma to be able to like actually properly live, which is a pretty common theme for a story, and that is exactly what this is. It's not like The House in the Cerulean Sea is like super dark, but the underlying messages in that one are somewhat more serious than they are in The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. So I probably should have DNF'd this one at this point with 55 pages left. I might as well continue. This is also like heavily romantic. Once again, there is a romance in The House in the Cerulean Sea. This one I would say feels like it's focused on a little bit more, like these 2 characters are spending a lot more time one-on-one than I felt that we had in The House in the Cerulean Sea. Not to directly compare this continuously to that book, but I do think that they are very, very similar, and this one is not hitting me on the emotional level that one did. Cozy fantasy, very hit or miss with me. I actually think the only example of a cozy fantasy that I've enjoyed is The House in the Cerulean Sea, so it's hard for me not to compare them, and I do like them sometimes because of that like emotional hit that you can get, but this one is feeling like not necessarily surface level, but it's just not really hitting any of those deeper emotions for me. So it's honestly just like kind of boring, which is unfortunate. But I'm going to finish the last 50 pages that I have and give you my final verdict, although I doubt it's going to change in that amount of time. So I finished The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and as anticipated, I did not love this one. When I picked it up, I kind of wanted to get swept away with like the cozy, witchy, Halloweeny vibes. The only real definitive time point that we have in here actually surrounds Christmas and like the winter solstice, so not necessarily the perfect Halloween read that I anticipated, but ultimately it just was a little bit boring for me. I really struggled to get swept into this one. I didn't really care about much that was happening. I think the experience that I wanted from this going into it was similar to the experience I had when reading the XX during October a few years ago, but unfortunately that was not the experience that I had. It is predominantly a romance actually, which I didn't expect going into it. I'm fine with a romantic subplot, and as soon as I kind of went into this and got any amount of the way through this book, I realized that we were going to have a romance, but I do feel like it was a little bit more dominant than I expected it to be in this book, which, I mean, it's fine that there was a romance in here. I was just expecting this to be more focused on the cozy fantasy vibes, like with The House in the Cerulean Sea, than I was the romance, which took up a little bit more page time than I expected. I am a romance reader. I read some contemporary romance. I read a lot of romantasy to varying degrees of enjoyment these days, but I'm not generally opposed to a romance. It's just when I go into a book, I kind of want to know what my degree of romance is going to be going into it, and I thought that the focus of this was definitely going to be more like wholesome, cozy fantasy than romantic content, and romantic content unfortunately was at the forefront of this one. So I gave it like a low 3-star. Honestly, in terms of how I feel about it, it's probably more of like a 2. It was fine. I will give it some credit though, because I really liked the plot twist that we had towards the end of this one, and the way that that played out I thought was quite clever. Didn't see it coming. It wasn't anything that like blew my socks off, but it did add a little bit of an unexpected element. I wasn't expecting there to be a plot twist in this book, so I did enjoy that. But I think in terms of my enjoyment, like, I did just generally think it was fine, therefore 2 stars. But I think if we talk about this objectively, there's nothing wrong with it. I just didn't have a particularly amazing time with it. It's not like I can say a bunch of negative stuff around it. I just didn't like it very much, and I found it quite boring. So low 3 stars. And unfortunately, this is going to be a scrap. So I have not yet filled the gap that I took this out of, because I had to get the cushions out so I could look for like a little bit of a thinner hardback further down the stacks. So I guess we'll do that now, and then we will pick my next read. So this is actually quite nicely situated, because this is the gap that I pulled the book from. So we're looking for something that is a little bit on the slim side. I actually might go for Lady of the Lake by Jean Menzies, which we do actually have some degree of alphabetization here, but regardless, this will go here anyway. And it is indeed the perfect size and just slots right in there. And then for my next trick, I'm going to show you exactly why I am horrible at mood reading, because I'm going to be picking something off my November TBR to read next. Not necessarily because I want to, but because I have to. I have a live show for this book coming up soon, and I normally like do a weekly vlog where I read the books in this series, but I haven't been weekly vlogging recently. So I thought the best kind of compromise in terms of like my video schedule, the fact that I'm not going to make a weekly vlogger in this book, and the fact that I'm currently in the middle of filming this episode, I thought the best kind of compromise would be to just read it for this. It does kind of fit as well as a book that I've hauled recently, but it is a book that I'm very, very likely to be shelving, and there is no space on the shelves for it. So if I don't read it in this episode and resolve it here, then I'm going to end up shelving it and then taking a book off the shelves to put in the stacks anyway. So instead of kind of making some space for stack books, we're now preventing books from ending up in the stacks, I guess. Some of y'all will have guessed what this is by now, but I'll take you to it. And the book in question is, of course, A Time of Blood by John Gwynne, which is my current read for Catch Up Book Club. So this in a nutshell is essentially why I am so terrible at mood reading. I'm not an especially slow reader, but I'm not an especially fast reader either, and I can't make myself read any quicker. Realistically, could I, for example, read this 472 page book in 2 days? Yes. Am I going to? No. Could I force myself to? Actually, no. Like, I really, really struggle unless I'm genuinely in the mindset to binge a book. I genuinely struggle at like locking in and making myself read really large chunks of anything, which is why I did that little 1 week project I did on like focus tips and helping me to focus, to try and get me to lock in a little better, because I know that if I do focus, I can do it. It's just like I don't have any genuine motivation to focus, and so I don't. So then it comes to a point like right now where if I continue to read what I want, I'll get further behind on the things that I need to read, and then that has a knock-on effect and makes me actually not want to read anything else. I'd rather just make progress on the things that I should be reading, and so we're going to pick up A Time of Blood. But like I said, I am probably going to be shelving this one. I have all of the other John Gwynne books that I've read so far on my shelves. I've just bought this because I need to read it before the live show, and shelving it during this and then reading something else off the shelves will break up the piece a little bit, because I feel like we don't spend a lot of time shelving on my paperback shelves to start off with. But also I have some really, really old books on there, because back in the day the UK didn't used to have a lot of hardbacks, so a lot of my paperback books are ancient, so we'll be able to sample something that I've had on my shelf for a really long time as well. But anyway, this is the second book in the spin-off series to The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne, which is the world that we're currently tackling for my epic fantasy book club, catch-up book club. If you are unaware, like if you're only here for Shelve It or Scrap It, but an epic fantasy book club is something that you may want to get involved in, I have just announced a little add-on to this round of catch-up book club where we're going to be reading the Bloodsworn saga by John Gwynne as well when we're finished with Of Blood and Bone, and you don't have to have read anything else by John Gwynne to read that series. It's set in a different world, so if you want to jump in, that would be like an excellent point. But it is really hard to discuss the Of Blood and Bone series without spoiling The Faithful and the Fallen, unfortunately. But essentially we're set in this world where there are humans and giants. There was an ancient war between the two of them which resolved in giants now being the stuff of legend. Like, people don't generally think that they exist. Now, during The Faithful and the Fallen, all of the like mythical elements of the world kind of come to the forefront again in the fulfillment of this ancient prophecy, where there is going to be an avatar for each of the gods in this world, and they are going to fight it out and one of them will win. So in Of Blood and Bone, we're dealing with the aftermath of that and the effect that this epic battle has had on the world as a whole. It's like 100 and something years after that final battle has resolved. So we're dealing with the legacies of the main characters from the Faithful and the Fallen series, as well as a new rising evil that has spawned from the result of that epic battle. I really enjoyed the first book in this series, A Time of Dread. I thought that it was darker than I anticipated. It had this like Hills Have Eyes horror element to it that I wasn't expecting, and also like a level of Van Helsing, which was weird, as well as some sinister like themes of systemic abuse that I didn't see come in, especially because for all intents and purposes, like The Faithful and the Fallen is just a standard epic high fantasy series. It doesn't really push the boundaries of epic fantasy in any real way, so the inclusion of some more obscure topics within this series did take me a little bit by surprise, but I did enjoy them. So in terms of epic fantasy, this isn't an especially long one. It's under 500 pages. I do tend to read these books quite slowly though, so we'll see how I go, but I definitely think it's better for me to include this in this episode than to try and read it alongside, because essentially I think what would happen is it would just stall the progress of this video to a complete stop. So I am 160 pages into A Time of Blood right now, and honestly, I can't say I'm enjoying it all that much, but we know what my track record is with fantasy right now. It's not great. Honestly, definitely could do with some work, and so maybe that is partially responsible, but I also think, having read 5 books from John Gwynne right now, this is my 6th, he does have a lot of battle scenes in his books, and that has been consistent throughout everything I've read from him. We had a lot in The Faithful and the Fallen, but The Faithful and the Fallen books were also considerably longer than the Of Blood and Bone books. I mean, these tend to fall more around like the 450 page mark, and considering they're also one book shorter, we have a lot packed in to significantly less pages than The Faithful and the Fallen, and I do feel like because of that we have quite a bit of action in these books. This one also has significantly more than the last book, because in A Time of Dread we were being introduced to these new characters, getting to know them, their situation and positioning in the world, as well as how the world looks now off the back of The Faithful and the Fallen. So I know from the live show from when we read A Time of Dread, a lot of people said that they thought that it was quite slow and a little bit more difficult to get into because of that slowness. I personally enjoy that a little bit more because I'm not big on action scenes and battle scenes specifically. John Gwynne can do them quite well. He's not my favourite at battle scenes. I like me some Sanderson, although not in the Stormlight Archive, and in terms of the style of these battle scenes, they do skew a little bit more like the Stormlight Archive. If I'm being honest, it's more like medieval fighting, because John Gwynne does participate in medieval reenactment. Is it medieval or is it like Viking? He does like battle reenactment anyway, so a lot of his scenes are really true to that, and I prefer my battle scenes when they have a little bit more going on. Like, my favourite battle scenes, fight scenes, are in the Mistborn series because of the physics of the magic system and how that is like utilised within the fighting, whereas this like typical stabbing and slashing is not really my thing. Now, it is a little bit more interesting because of the mythical creatures we have in this series. Like, instead of horses, although there are horses, we have people who ride bears, people who ride these big lizard things called drakes, even though that's more common in The Faithful and the Fallen than it is in here. And we also have like wolf companions, so there's a little bit more going on in that regard. But in terms of like the people fighting, it is very much like a classical battle strategy kind of series, which just doesn't interest me as much. And this really gets straight into the action. It starts off directly after A Time of Dread, and we have a lot of significant reveals towards the end of that first book, and as it all kind of like climaxes at the end of A Time of Dread, we don't really see much of the aftermath before the book draws to a close, and we're getting straight back into it when we pick up A Time of Blood. Some of the perspectives I guess are a little bit more interesting. I think the thing that I'm struggling with right now though is that my favorite perspectives from A Time of Dread are the ones that are more heavily action focused, and the ones that are getting a little bit more into the politics of the world are the two perspectives that I enjoyed the least from the first book. So the things that I really liked about book one are currently not super present in this one, and I actually don't think that they're going to be super present for the rest of the series, because some of those perspectives, yes, both of those perspectives, the ones that I really enjoyed, have significantly changed due to the events of the end of book one. So some of the elements that I really enjoyed about them are sadly missing from A Time of Blood. I do feel like as well we are having a little bit less progression than I would like in terms of the topics that I'm more interested in, because we are in these more like action focused scenes. We're not really progressing the plot, we're more kind of like fighting for our lives. That being said, we do have one new perspective in this book, which I do definitely think is an interesting one, and I think it's interesting because of the people that this perspective represents. It's a perspective that we have not had so far in this series, and in terms of like the kind of factions that character is represented, it is very different than it was in The Faithful and the Fallen and the people who were kind of like tied to that in those books, because a lot has happened in the first book in this series. I am of course purposefully being kind of vague about this because it's the second book in a series, but also because it is heavily dependent on the events of The Faithful and the Fallen, so that definitely limits what I can tell you. I know that Aaron has already read. Aaron from Booked and Busy is one of the members of Catch Up Book Club, and she has already sped ahead and finished this trilogy, and I'm pretty sure she said that A Time of Blood was her favourite book, so I'm definitely expecting some exciting things to come. But right now I'm not hating it, but I'm not having the best time with it either. I've hit the page 300 mark in A Time of Blood now. I think I'm on page 310, and I'm happy to let you guys know that I do feel like I've warmed up to this now. I think I've pretty much blasted through 140ish pages of this so far today, and I'm having a much better time. I do think that it is a relatively easy read in comparison to The Faithful and the Fallen, which is funny because that is pretty much in direct contradiction to what I was talking about yesterday, where I was saying it's a little bit too action focused. This series really takes out a lot of the slower moments that you have in The Faithful and the Fallen series, which means that it can read a little bit faster in places because you have less like traveling and you have a lot less characters to follow, which does speed up the narrative a little bit. I do feel like the fact that it is a little bit more action packed, of course, impacts my enjoyment of it, but I do also think that it does somewhat make for an easier reading experience. I am not loving that some of the events in this plot feel a little bit accelerated. You could once again say the same for The Faithful and the Fallen, but because you're switching between so many characters, I feel like a realistic amount of time passes between revisiting some of those perspectives, so it makes sense that they could have like traveled a pretty vast distance within that time. Whereas in this, we had characters moving from one area of the map to a different area, and then eventually they kind of have to make their way back to where they started from. And in 350 pages, they have both started at their origin points, made it to where they were going, which is a significant like way across the map, waited there a while for some things to happen, and then headed back out and started moving back towards the place where they started from. So I feel like we are skipping like large sections of time as these things are happening, and because of that I do feel like I am struggling to pinpoint the timeline a little bit. I can't remember now. I know we discussed it in the live shows, like the timeline of The Faithful and the Fallen. I think it's like takes place over like a year and a half or 2 years or something. This one I'm guessing is a much smaller timeline. I do think though that I'm getting a good picture of what the end game of this series is, because when I read the first book I was saying how because these books are so short and because there's only 3 of them, I don't feel like we're going to get a full resolution to the problems in this world. We're maybe going to deal with like the current resurgence of the bad stuff that's going on, but I don't feel like we can resolve this in a way where we can put this world to bed for good and have kind of resolved all of the evil to a place where everyone can kind of just live happily ever after in peace. Like I don't feel like that is the end game of this series, and because of that I didn't really know what the problem that we were going to be tackling in this series was, and I do feel like I'm getting a better picture of that now. It's really funny though actually, because if you saw my announcement video for the little addition we're doing to Catch Up Book Club, which is of course the Bloodbone saga. I said when we've completed that series, that will be the end of Faithful All Along for this iteration. And I was like, unless John Gwynne releases any books, but he doesn't have any announced right now. Literally the day after that video went live, he posted on, I think, Instagram that his like first draft or something of like his new book was done. So we do have something else coming from John Gwynne. I think from just like vaguely things that I've heard that people do expect him to revisit the world of the Bloodbone saga at some point. So I don't know whether he's going in that direction, whether he's going to be revisiting the Banished Lands. All I know is that I think his Instagram post said that it's the first book in a new series, but I mean, these are all different series, so that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But I do think that we definitely, in 150 pages and one other quite small book, that we really have enough page time to wrap up everything that really needs to be wrapped up. I think that this series follows a much smaller selection of people within this world dealing with, I want to say, a smaller conflict, because the conflict in The Faithful and the Fallen was very different to the known reality of the characters. Like the things that they were going to have to face were things that were previously unheard of, whereas after the events of The Faithful and the Fallen, like the people in this world are now quite used to some of the things that were previously like never heard of before in the first series. So I feel like an equilibrium for them, like a relative peace, looks a lot different than it would for the characters in the first series. And so maybe we're not going to resolve as much as I feel like we need to, but I do feel like there is a lot of like corruption in this world and things that really need to be laid to bed that we're not going to be tackling in this series. I can't really talk about this any more than that, because what I don't want to do, because of how John Gwynne is not necessarily afraid to kill his characters, I don't want to tell you like who my favorite perspectives are and who like what I'm not enjoying, because I feel like giving any information about who's still here and who's still alive and maybe who the new perspectives are gives a little bit too much away for this series. But I will say that my favorite perspective of this book, I think, still remains to be the same perspective that I really enjoyed about the first book. So if you followed along with the live shows, like you'll probably know who I'm talking about. And the perspectives that I didn't enjoy as much still at this point are my least favorite perspectives. But I think one of my main issues is that one of the perspectives that I loved from the first book is no longer in this book, and the perspective that has replaced it is fine. It's not one of my favorites, which leaves just one character that I'm really enjoying following. But something that I did really like about this last section that I've just read since I last checked in with you is that we visited a location that felt like coming home, and it's not actually a location from The Faithful and the Fallen, but it is kind of tied to those characters and those events. And I really liked seeing that location through the lens of this character who has never met those characters like from the original series. The funny thing about it as well is that because this is a series that can stand on its own, there was a lot of information of like other characters telling this character who's new to the area like the lore and the history behind it, which if you read The Faithful and the Fallen you know, and it's really interesting to hear these characters that we came to love in that past series talked about in this one. So I'm definitely having a much better time with this than I was having when I first checked in with you. At this point I don't really know whether I prefer The Faithful. I think I do like The Faithful and the Fallen because I think there was more characters in that series that I really enjoyed, and in this one there's just some perspectives. You know what the thing is as well is that I thought that they would be interesting, but in execution like I'm just not feeling any kind of draw to them that I maybe expected to, even though their perspectives are following more like political advancement and also the real like root of the corruption and the progression of the corruption in this world. But just the perspectives that we're following, I think I'm not especially attached to them as characters. That's kind of ruining my enjoyment of what it is exactly that they're narrating. There's no doubt, I mean, there's definitely no doubt that this is going to be a shelve. We knew that when I started it. The irony of this though is that the day after I started this book, I had a discussion with the hosts and we've decided to push the live show back by a week. So I don't actually need to be reading this book right now, and I'm going to be finished with it well in advance of the live show, which I don't like to do for Catch Up Book Club because I like to be really fresh so I can talk about like the fine details. But yeah, here we are. I was already like 150 pages in when we made that decision, so I wasn't about to put it down and move on to something else for the time being, and at least I'll be well prepared for when the live show rolls around. Hello my friends, welcome to the season reason of poor lighting past 3 p.m. I am doing sprints with my patrons tonight, so I've just got a little bit of a workout in and I'm about to go shower. But first, because after I shower, I'm going to be making dinner and then I'll be in sprints and I won't have time to do this. So before I did all of that, I wanted to let you guys know that I have finished A Time of Blood and I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The first 150 pages were a little bit rocky for me, but I definitely got very absorbed past that point all the way to the end. Now, like I said, very action-packed series, and the last 100 pages of this was pretty much one big battle that brought us to the end of this book. I did not see the end of this coming though, and now I'm even more intrigued how we're going to bring this to a close as a series, because we've now added an extra element, which honestly not seeing it coming was on me, because it was something that was mentioned in A Time of Dread, obviously something that was motivating the characters, because we had all of this other stuff going on and things getting in the way. I forgot the thing that happened was actually a goal of theirs. So when it happened, I was like, okay, well, how are we going to resolve this? How are we going to resolve this now? We already had all of this stuff going on. We already have the corruption in the land. We already have all of these people in power who are taking advantage of it, and that's not even necessarily the bad guys that are doing that. And then we have all of the crazy stuff with the bad guys going on, and now we have this. So I am a little worried about how this series is going to come to a close, and I do still think that we're not going to have the satisfactory resolution of everything all wrapped in a bow that I would like. And actually that is how The Faithful and the Fallen ended as well. I wasn't particularly pleased with the ending, because I felt like we left all of these threads unexplored, and then knowing that the next series was going to be 150 years in the future indicated that we were still not going to see the resolution directly of those threads, just kind of what they amounted to in the distant future. Interestingly as well, there is an interview with John Gwynne at the back of this, which I think is a new addition for the re-release of this series that matches the covers. This is a reprint with a new cover of this series that has been done to match The Faithful and the Fallen. So I think that the interview is exclusive to this new edition, and it does say that if John Gwynne revisits this world, it is going to be another 150-ish years in the future as the world starts to move into the medieval age, because I think he said that the 2 series so far are set towards the end of the Iron Age. Is that correct? I do not know history. We know this. Not even British history, which is what this series is based off. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I actually had a great time in a kind of twisted way with the backstory of one of the characters, that new perspective that we got in here as we learned more about them, because they are present in the first book, but we don't have their inner thoughts. So as we got those in here and we learned more about their motivations and how they've ended up where they are, I was shell-shocked. And once again, if I'd have actually been connecting the dots, I would have got there myself, but alas, I was not. And I think that John Gwynne has lulled me into a false sense of security in that regard, because one of my main criticisms of The Faithful and the Fallen was that I didn't feel like it had enough plot twists, and that was what was really not killing the series for me, but it's why I only gave the second book 5 stars, and it was kind of a low 5. None of them are one of my favorite books ever, mainly because I felt like the series lacked plot twist. We had some, I think, towards the end of book 3, and that was pretty much all we got. But John Gwynne is definitely making up for it in the Blood and Bone series. The unfortunate thing about this one, though, is that I am just not enjoying it as much, and I think it is because we have a much smaller cast of characters, which does make this easier to read and faster and easier to get into. But I'm also not especially connected to the characters, probably because of the length of the books. I need to see characters in their slow moments to be able to connect to them and root for them, which we don't get a whole ton of slow moments in this series at all, really. Like I said, there is an area of this book where a character visits a location for the first time, and I said it felt like coming home. We didn't get a whole lot of time just existing. I think that they were there for at least a month, and we didn't get a whole lot of time in the day-to-day of that location, which I would have really liked to explore, because we are prioritizing the plot in this one. And in the Faithful and the Fallen series, even though it was a little bit slower and it got a little bit boring sometimes because of that, when I compare these two, am I enjoying this series more or the Faithful and the Fallen more, I keep coming back to all of those characters that I love so much in the Faithful and the Fallen, like Veradis, like Maquin, and there's just no characters of that caliber in here for me, unfortunately. So this one was a solid 4-star read. Had a great time, very excited to continue this series. I do think that John Gwynne has grown as an author between the series, even though I'm probably enjoying them about the same because of the differences between them and how that affects my enjoyment. But I do feel like there are some ways in which this is a stronger and tighter series in comparison to The Faithful and the Fallen. So we already knew that this was going to be a shelve when we went into it, so we're going to go ahead and do that and see if we can pick my next read for sprints this evening. So these shelves that we're dealing with are of course going to be the paperback ones. We don't see these ones very often, and the specific one you can only just see, actually let me just lift us up a tad, is this one here. You can already see I have my John Gwynne books all in a row, and this one is going to be joining it. But because we like to do a little bookshelf tour when we do these things, I'm going to show you, because I've read actually across this whole row, I've read the majority of these are, like I said, some of my really old books, so we'll see what we have to pick from for my next book. So starting off on this side, I've read all of the Becca Fitzpatricks and the Gail Formans, all of the Beautiful Creatures. This is a like Regency romance kind of series, the only one that I've ever enjoyed. This was like Gossip Girl in the 1800s. It was amazing. Read it a very, very long time ago. And I've also read all of the John Gwynnes. So for this half, we just have Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray. This one was a extra paperback that I think came in a fairy loot. So it's not actually one that I'm interested in at all, but I don't like to unhaul books without at least giving them a try, so this one is an option. And then something that I've had for a really long time is the Smoke Thieves by Sally Green. This was an extra paperback that came in an Illumicrate, but it was an Illumicrate that my friend got. I borrowed this off him many years ago, and he stopped asking for it back a long time ago as well. If I read this, I'll ask him if he wants it back. But I read the other series by Sally Green a long time ago and enjoyed it, so I wanted to read this because this I think is more like high fantasy. But like I said, that was many years ago. For the Rachel Griffins, I think I've read Wild as the Witch, and I think it's Bring Me On Midnight that I haven't read, so one of those is an option. Read all of the John Gwynnes. I've read the Rebel of the Sands trilogy, all of the original Discovery of Witches trilogy, and the Imaginary Corpse, which I think I read for an early episode of Shelve It or Scrap It. So I also haven't read Seraphina or Tess of the Road, and these would be a good option because I think they're set in the same world. So if I read one of them and didn't enjoy it, then that would be a good indication of whether I should also keep the other book. So I actually, of the ones that we have as options, don't really know what they're about. I think I'm actually going to rule out the Rachel Griffin though, because if I read this, it's not going to be a big enough gap because this is a really tight shelf to be able to get a Time of Blood on. So let's see about the others. This has a lot to do with animals in it, and it takes place in a zoo and also in a place that was a city of magic when magic no longer exists. This one seems like a very classic like young adult multi-perspective high fantasy, which could be interesting. I forgot as well, this was actually an arc that came in an Illumicrate, not a like regular book. Let's have a look at Seraphina, because I think of these two, I think Seraphina comes first. You can read, this is the first book in a duology, and this one can be read on its own as a standalone, but I think it has spoilers for Seraphina. This one has dragons in it, which I did know. The thing that worries me about this and my like potential enjoyment is that it looks kind of like Victorian, and it also seems like it has a murder mystery. It says equal parts fast-paced fantasy, crime mystery, bittersweet romance, and political thriller. This is an astonishing original take on the dragon myth. In terms of which of these I think I have the potential to enjoy the most, I do think that it is the Smoke Thieves by Sally Green, but I think I might go with Seraphina because I've had this for a really long time. This one is the first one that I got, and then I found this one secondhand, and obviously you should read this one first, which is why I haven't read either of them. I just don't know if Seraphina is going to create a big enough gap, so let's see. It isn't, but I wanted to read this for the potential of maybe getting an idea of whether I wanted to read Tess of the Road as well, but I don't think that's going to be an option for us today. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to go with The Smoke Thieves by Sally Green, which should allow me to move hopefully both of these. Yeah, because there was extra room on this shelf as well. And then I now have plenty of space for A Time of Blood. So this says it's an epic fantasy series perfect for fans of Leigh Bardugo and Game of Thrones, but we know how many times we've seen a Game of Thrones on a blurb and how many times that has actually been accurate. So it looks like this is, like it says, the first book in a new epic fantasy series. Pretty sure it's young adult. As the kingdom's alliances shift and shatter, these 5 young people find their futures inextricably linked by a mysterious bottle of demon smoke and by the unpredictable tides of war. Aside from that, it just outlines like what kind of perspectives we're going to be getting here. I'm assuming it's going to be 5. This reminds me, because of how kind of classic the synopsis is, it reminds me of things like The Demon King by Cinda Williams Chimer and also Fallen Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. Still haven't read that, but I do on the whole series. We're not going to talk about that though. We're talking about the smoke thieves. So I guess I'll crack into this in sprints today and let you guys know what I think. I am about to film my final book haul of 2025. I was actually kind of worried about this, but I don't think it's as bad as I initially thought that it was, which is great considering my goals and this project that we're working on together. But I wanted to take the opportunity while I'm looking like a semi-respectable put together human, because we know I'm not always, to talk to you guys about The Smoke Thieves by Sally Green, because I've got a little ahead of myself. I'm over halfway through this book now because I took myself to London yesterday for a day trip. This was a personal trip, not a book event. I'll show you why I went actually. You just hold on right there. I had a tattoo appointment with the lovely G from G Tattoo on Instagram. I will link her in the description box because I wanted a very special piece. I've been a big fan of G's work for a long time. She does absolutely stunning florals. Personally, I'm not a flower person in any way, shape or form. And so I was waiting for the perfect piece to come up for G's specific like style and skill set. And while I wish it was under better circumstances, I did find the perfect piece for G. And she was like so kind and helpful and enthusiastic in putting this together, and it is absolutely stunning. I'm so pleased with it. Look at that. Isn't that the most beautiful thing you ever saw? Look at my baby girl. She's so pretty. G also made amazing use of the space that I have kind of between the tattoos that I've already got, and it turned out even better than I imagined. I know that she's amazing at all kinds of animal portraits. She does like pet stuff obviously, but also just like general animals, tigers. She's done like a painted dog and all sorts. So I knew that she was perfect for this project, but still I think it blew my mind and I'm so obsessed with it. I've cried a lot over it as well, of course, but I just think that she did an amazing job and it's perfect and I'm in love. So like I said, I'll link her Instagram down below if you want to check out her work and give her a follow. Her home studio is actually in Brighton, but she's also doing guest spots in London, I think like 2 days every month up until at least February, if London is a little bit more accessible to you as well. But anyway, the point is not the tattoo. That's just a little side tangent. The point is that I read pretty much half of this book on the train to and from London. I wish I could afford to get a train to and from London every day. Would be very tiring, also very expensive, but I would also read a lot because I really lock in when I'm on the train. And you know what? I'm really enjoying this one. I said when I picked it off the shelf that I thought that it would be the one out of the, was it 4 options that we had that I did enjoy the most? But I'll be honest with you, this is a book where if I had to cull my shelves, like if this project was ending tomorrow and I had to get everything on shelves, this would be a strong contender for being on hold without me reading it, because it's like not super old, but it's old enough now that in conjunction with the little that I've ever heard people talk about this series, it would have been one that I kind of wrote off as like a generic young adult fantasy that is very like middle of the road. Because you know, you have your standout books, like I'm going to throw it back to something like Six of Crows, okay? That is a standout of its year that people keep coming back to and enjoying and reading like 10 years on. This I don't really hear people talk about, so it would probably have been on the chopping block. And this is the reason why I do this challenge, and this is the reason why I do give books a chance. I do have questions about this occasionally, so I like to address it occasionally. I get questions asking me like, if you think this book is not for you, if you're not particularly enthusiastic about the synopsis, why do you consistently give this book a try and don't just like unhaul it? It's because of books like this, because there's so many times that I've thought that a book is going to be amazing and it's let me down. And then there's also quite a lot of times where I've thought that a book was going to be one that I really didn't care about and I've ended up really liking it. I will say that I do like this type of fantasy, and that probably plays a big role in why I'm having a good time with this. I said that the synopsis sounded like The Demon King by Cinda Williams-Shimer, that kind of story. In execution, it is that kind of story, and I really like that kind of multi-perspective young adult fantasy where we have all of these different characters that end up coming together for some reason to achieve a task, or they end up kind of thrown into each other's paths so that their paths converge and they end up like with the same purpose. Slightly different kind of story, but the Broken Blade series by Mike Holland is similar. Is it doing anything revolutionary for the genre? No, but I really enjoy it because it's a multi-perspective fantasy with some capers and jaunts along the way. I don't really know how to break this one down for you in terms of a synopsis because it is multi-perspective and we haven't got to a point yet where all of these perspectives are converging. So I guess I'll talk to you a little bit about each of our 5 characters, which means I'm gonna have to actually like refresh myself on who they are because I'm terrible with names. But the first one that we're introduced to is Tash, and she was bought by a man. They have a good relationship though, which sounds weird, but she was bought by a man to catch demons so that they could harvest the demon smoke, which is why the book is called The Smoke Thieves. It's like a potent drug. It's illegal. You're not supposed to sell it, you're not supposed to take it, but it is a very potent drug and people pay a lot of money for it. And the reason why Tash is chosen is because she runs really fast. So they are capturing this demon smoke to sell, and that is where their path intersects with Edjon, I think is his name. Yes, and he is the bastard son of a prince. The prince's children have all died, and so now he sent his advisor to go and seek out this bastard son. And Edjon has a compulsion to steal. He doesn't really mean to, he doesn't really want to, and he feels bad after he's done it, but he ends up stealing the demon smoke from Tash, and Tash ends up trying to hunt him down to find it. We also have March in here, and he is from, his perspective is the one that I haven't quite got my head around yet, but he is from a country that I think has been conquered. I think it was like collateral damage in some sort of war between the nations. I think something that I'm really struggling with in this book so far is getting to grips on who belongs to which country and who went to war with each other and who's an ally and who's an enemy. But his country doesn't exist anymore. And he knows another man who is from the same place as him, who is trying to, I think, get some kind of revenge on the royal family of one of like the countries that orchestrated this war. So March goes to Edjon to intercept the advisor that's been sent to get Edjon, and they say that they are the ones that have been sent to collect him and take him to his father, the prince. And so Edjon ends up kind of like going along with them, thinking that he's going to his father, but actually they have other plans for him. However, Edjon and March are potentially attracted to each other, so we're exploring that as well. Then we also have a princess called Catherine. This is a world that is not very kind to women. Women are essentially just wives. They need to know their place. They're not allowed to really talk to anybody, even other women, because women talking is dangerous, and they're definitely not allowed to talk to men. Now, she is like low-key in love with her guard, but she is to be married to a prince of a different kingdom, and so people don't like the way, like her family don't like the way that she's looking at this guard. So the guard is another one of our perspectives, our final one. He's called Ambrose, and he has to flee the country because Catherine's brother has it out for him. So he does that and ends up uncovering some war plans between the nation that like Catherine is from and is of the royal family of, and the one that she's going to marry. So it seems like her family are potentially going to double cross her, and he, being so full of honor and also love for our princess, feels like he needs to go and warn her that this is about to happen. Meanwhile, she is being taken to this new country to become this bride, but she hasn't met this prince. And even when she arrives, like he seems kind of evasive, like she doesn't know where he is. She still hasn't met him, even coming to his country to become the princess and eventual like queen of this land. And she does not really appreciate the position in society that she is expected to conform to. And going to this new country that are a little bit more liberal, she is poisoning herself to kind of like make a name for herself and be more than just like the silent meek woman that hides in the background. So I'm not really sure how Ambrose and Catherine fit in with the rest of the cast of characters that we have going on so far, but it's definitely, I think, given the title of the book, it surrounds this demon smoke, and we actually don't really know very much about the demons of this world. We've seen one from Tash's perspective, but I feel like there's going to be a conflict between what people have been told about demons and what is true about demons. And we also have to factor in that a lot of people don't really know that demons exist. They are kind of like a mythical, legendary creature in this world that do not really concern the lives of any of our characters aside from Tash. And of course then Edjon, when he comes in possession of this bottle of demon smoke and starts to like explore its uses a little bit. So I am having a good time with it. It has a little bit more humor than I'm typically comfortable with. It's almost like, and I say to take this very lightly, it's almost like a very light Joe Abercrombie in the tone. Like it's giving a little bit of Spellslinger by Sebastian D. Castell, and I say take this lightly because I don't like the writing style of either of those authors, but it is like super light. Overall, we have a little bit of a humorous, jovial tone to this, which typically doesn't work for me, and that's why I am kind of confused why I'm having such a good time with this. It is a lot lighter in that it's not as dark or gory, or we're not making fart jokes like we do sometimes with Joe Abercrombie, and it's not quite as fun and games and over the top as Spellslinger by Sebastian D. Castell, but we do have a lightness to the tone of this one while still being that very classic like European-esque multi-perspective young adult fantasy. I am experiencing emotional turmoil right now because I want to bring you guys an update, but I don't want to disturb Hammy boy. Come here. Oh, he's so heavy. He's not a small boy, and he won't stay on my knee while I talk to you guys because he's grumpy. He grumpy. Hello. You're going to stay and talk to the people? Maybe. This is just going to be a quick one because I actually don't have very much of the Smoke Thieves left. I'm 380 pages into it. I'm pretty sure it's like 460-ish. Yeah, 466 pages long. And I am still very much enjoying it. There's just one thing that I'm not enjoying so much, and that is the way one of the characters is talked about in this series, because the princess character, Catherine, is to be married to this prince of another kingdom, and he was in an accident when he was a kid, which has left him with scarring pretty much down one entire like side of his body. And I don't really like the way that they talk about him, because it's kind of like, oh, he'd be so handsome if he wasn't so horribly disfigured, and I'm like, okay then, that's uncomfortable. And it's really frustrating because he keeps being referenced in this kind of way, like one half of his face is attractive and the other half is like horribly scarred, and it's like, okay, like I get it, we don't have to keep harping on about it. And he's really like genuinely a nice guy, and everybody who's met him that we've seen meet him really enjoys him, and he seems to be like a stand-up character, which in this world of like royal corruption and bigotry is an amazing thing. But we have to keep kind of like reminding ourselves that, or reminding the reader that, like, yeah, he could be attractive if it wasn't for the scars that he gained during a childhood accident. But aside from that, I am having a really, really good time with this book. The plot has kind of heated up a little bit. I still don't really know how the two different sides that we have here are going to meet, because we do have like Tash, March and Edjon, who are all like chasing each other around in one part of the world. And then we have Catherine and Ambrose, who are more embroiled in this political plot line, which is somehow tied into Demon Smoke. So we've kind of made that connection now, because Edjon, Tash and March are all in possession of Demon Smoke. And then Catherine is learning that maybe the crown of like the country where she's from, which is her family essentially, may have something to do with Demon Smoke as well, although she has no idea in what capacity or what possible reason that could be for. So I feel like we have that as a common thread, which makes sense obviously because the series is called The Smoke Thieves, so the smoke is super relevant. But aside from that, we're more delving into the political sides of things and like war that is potentially brewing in like Catherine and Ambrose's perspective. And then the other three characters are like still political, because March is taking Edjon to essentially be held hostage against a different royal family. But we also have Tash in there, who is essentially just somebody who runs around and steals Demon Smoke. She's really fast. And Edjon himself has grown up in like a traveling fair, even though he is like the bastard son of a prince. And March is a servant. I mean, on the back of this, like I said when I picked it up, it does compare it to Game of Thrones. I kind of understand that obviously it's not Game of Thrones, and European inspired political fantasy does not equal Game of Thrones, but I do understand the comparison, especially, and you know what, I completely forgot that was in the synopsis. When I was reading it, there was a country that came up called Dornan, and I was like, isn't that in Game of Thrones? And then I remembered that it's Dawn, not Dornan. I think the Game of Thrones influence is strong in here. It also reminds me of things like what is the series called? What's the first book called? The Name of the Wind. The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons, that series. I think because we have humor, like it's multi-perspective, but we have like a humorous narration style. It reminds me a little bit of that series, but nowhere near as like overly complex and convoluted. This is like super easy to follow now that I'm further into it as well. I am a lot more familiar with the different countries and essentially who's affiliated with them. There is a map that I could be referencing here to get a grip on the countries, but I kind of know like which country every character is affiliated with at this point. I just haven't gotten to grips with the politics between the countries and who's like an enemy of who and who's an ally and all of that kind of stuff. But that stuff is like sinking in now. So the last 80 pages, I was looking at Goodreads reviews to see if anybody had picked up on the way that the prince, he's called Prince to Zane to see if anybody had picked up on the way that he's discussed in this book. So I flicked through like a couple of reviews and somebody said it ends on a cliffhanger, which is interesting. So I finished The Smoke Thieves and I really enjoyed it. This does remind me a lot of the like Broken Blade series by Mike Holland in that it's not really doing anything new or exceptional for this genre, which is, like I said before, like it's adjacent to the Broken Blades. They're on a heist mission, so it's slightly different, but it's still that like multi-perspective kind of chaotic cast of characters thrown together and put on the same path. And like with the Broken Blade series, this isn't breaking the boundaries of the genre. It's not doing anything that we haven't seen before, but it is a formula or like a structure that I do enjoy, executed reasonably well. And so I had a good time with it. The only thing that I have to say that's really negative about it is the way that the prince is described in here, which does continue throughout the course of the book. I will say as well that the Goodreads review that I read really oversold the ending. Does it end on a cliffhanger? Technically, yes, but not one where I'm like desperate to pick up book 2 to see what happens next. I'm just like, oh cool, this is the direction we're going in. Did not see it coming, but here we are. So I do want to continue on with this series. Whether I do or not, I will say is just going to be a test of time. We're going to see what happens, because I do feel like this is the kind of series that is going to sit on my shelves for a long time, kind of waiting for me to cycle back around to it, which, to be fair, unless I am obsessed with a book when I finish it, that is what happens to the majority of series right now. So I'm going to be shelving this, which is unfortunate, because when we shelved A Time of Blood, the idea was to pick a book that was in theory going to be a scrap, and it's always great to enjoy a book that you think you're going to scrap. But when I was enjoying this, I was like, okay, I borrowed this from a friend, which means that I don't necessarily have to shelve it because I can give it back. So I messaged him and I was like, okay, I'm finally reading this book that you have been intermittently asking me about for the last 8 years. So do you want it back now? And he was like, at this point, babe, you might as well keep it. So looks like we're shelving The Smoke Thieves. What was once a blessing has now turned out to be a burden. I don't know what I do have an idea actually of what we're going to be picking up next. So let's go over to the shelves to pick book 6 for this vlog. So of course we know exactly where this book came from, and the aim here is to just put it back where it belongs, which is in between John Green and Rachel Griffin. So we are still dealing with pretty much these two shelves. We could, because we're dealing with this one, we could throw it up to the shelf above, which does have some options, but given that we've already kind of assessed these two shelves here, I think what I'm going to try and do is read Seraphina, which we know was my first choice when I had to pick up The Smoke Thieves instead. But because we have more space on this shelf, I'm thinking that maybe we will be able to shelve this and read this one, but we'll see. So we would have to move up this. I just don't know if we're going to get both of these on this shelf. I don't think we are, but this one's thicker. So if we put that one there. Yes. Perfection. So next up we have Seraphina by Rachel Hartman. So essentially the reason why this one is a predicted scrap for me is just because it does look Victorian based on the landscape that we have here on the cover that is also on the back of the book. Dragon books as well, like I love dragons in theory, but there's only a handful of times that they've worked for me in execution. I will say that it doesn't say anything necessarily historical on the synopsis of this, but it does have a murder mystery. Like, it's described as equal parts fast-paced fantasy, crime mystery, bittersweet romance, and political thriller. So I am concerned about that crime mystery part, because that is like literally a genre that I avoid at all costs. You will not find me reading traditional crime books and traditional like murder mysteries, and that combined with what feels like potentially a Victorian setting is not doing it for me. But I'm pretty sure this series was recommended to me, well, not to me specifically, but I picked up this recommendation from either Pierre Ford or Kaz from The Little Book Owl many years ago. I think that they were reading Tess of the Road, not Seraphina, but they had already read Seraphina, which is how I found out about this one. And typically, you know, my taste does align with those two, so there is a good chance that I'm going to enjoy this. I just think that the vibes that I'm getting from it is what has made me put it off for so long. But now is my time to try this one and see what happens. So I have sampled Seraphina, and unfortunately, I feel like a sample is as far as I'm going to be getting with this one. I only read 24 pages So yeah, it was truly a sample. I read the prologue and the first 2 chapters, but I really just don't feel like the writing style is for me in this one. It reminds me a lot of, and I read this book a long time ago and I didn't like it, so I can't pinpoint specifically why it's reminded me of this book, but it's reminded me of Sabriel by Gothic, which is a series, like a beloved fantasy series, I think from the 90s, that I put off for a long time, and I was really excited to read, and it just really didn't work for me. I think that series and also the writing style in this is quite reminiscent of classic fantasy, maybe evolving from something like Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin, that's right, isn't it? Ursula K. Le Guin. Anyway, I did not like the Earthsea series, and I feel like this is potentially going to be pacier because part of the problem with Earthsea for me is that it goes on and on and on, and Sabriel is pacier, but the writing style is reminiscent maybe of something like historical fiction, which as we know is not my genre, and I think it is just a little bit too reminiscent of classic fantasy for my tastes. And I honestly, I only read 24 pages, but I zoned out for most of those. I was not having a good time with it. So unfortunately, this does mean that I'm going to be scrapping Seraphina. I know that this is a beloved duology for a few people. I feel like it's more of a cult one. It's not super popular, but the people who love this series really love it, And because of this, I do think I'm also going to be scrapping Tess of the Road, because while I do know you can enjoy that story on its own and that it's set, I think it has a little bit of a different setting, or it's maybe in a different time period than this one. I honestly just know that I'm not going to reach for it if I didn't enjoy the series that it's spinned off from. And I do know for sure that people have enjoyed Tess of the Road that don't enjoy Seraphina, but come on, there are so many books in the world. Why would I give a chance to something that's a spin-off from something that I didn't want to read? We're trying to be realistic here, somewhat, sometimes. I will say though that this is not historical like I thought it was. This is not representative of Victorian England. This is a high fantasy series set in a city that has a truce with the dragons. And obviously I didn't make it very far into this, so I don't know exactly how dragons were woven into the story, but I do know that it was not in the traditional sense and that there were people that were dragons potentially, though I don't know exactly the mechanics of how that worked. But the writing style for sure was just really not for me, which is unfortunate because I feel like the unusual lore in this one could be really interesting if I could get past the writing style. So before I pick my next book, which is going to be coming from the stacks, I am going to go to the shelves to remove Tess of the Road and fill that gap on the shelves with something from the stacks. Tess of the Road is, of course, out of here. I actually really like the cover on this one as well. And from the stacks, we actually have a shortage of paperbacks. So the ones that I could find that were closest in terms of author name was The Fact of a Body, which I don't really want to shelve this because I want to read it soon. And then Twin Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Webber. This one's a pretty thick one, so this might be the only one that we get on the shelf. And if we do have space for one more, then I do also have The Fact of a Body. So let's rearrange. I'm actually not making as much space as I thought I was going to anyway, because we have a gap here now that I'm not sure I can fit We Free the Stars into. So, that is kind of small. I realized earlier as well that none of these books should really be on here. They should be on my romance shelves upstairs, but that's something I'm not going to think about right now. I need to get Twin Crowns in here. I can't move this down because there's no room. It's a thick book, it's really not going to fit. My only other option here would be to shelve a completely different book. Oh no, I can't even move that along. Okay, let's try The Fact of a Body. Nope. I now need to go get an Echo of Things to Come because that needs to have its spot reserved on the shelves. I still haven't made much space here. HIJKL. I hate shelves. Why is this happening to me? Just breathe through it. It's going to be okay. Okay, it was a squeeze, but I got the Devouring Grey up there, so now it does give me more space here for JK. Oh my days, there's so much K. L. And this is an M. So let's keep going. Martin Marzano. Oh, I hate when we have to move these. M-A-R. There we go. And now I have more space than I need. I hate it here. Nothing else I have fits within this alphabet. That's just the way it's gonna have to be, because I can't. Also, where does oh, Graceling goes in there, so I need to save that gap as well. Okay, we're done. Let's put this back on my TBR. So the book that I've selected from the stacks for what is hopefully going to be our final book of this vlog, I was a little bit torn about what I wanted to pick actually, because I didn't feel like I had a preference in terms of genre. Like there was nothing that I felt especially drawn to, but we are mood reading and I kind of wanted to honor that a little bit. If I'm being honest, what I could really do with right now is a good audiobook, but none of the choices in the stacks were like screaming audio to me in a way, because I mean there's probably great audiobooks in there, but there was nothing that I felt like I could really sink into and like knew for sure that the audiobook was the right route to go with that book, because I tend to go on like recommendations from you guys of what you guys tell me is good, or certain genres. I obviously lean more towards audio. So the book that I went with is one that's on my November TBR. For the months of November and December, I am going to be participating in the Clear Your Shit readathon. I participate every year. I'll put the announcement video down in my description box if you guys want to check it out, because it does run for 2 months, so you have plenty of time. You can participate any way you want to, so you can like double up on your prompts or like quadruple up, whatever it is you want to do. I try to do 1 book per prompt, and I never finish the readathon, but that's absolutely fine. I just like that it gives me a little bit of direction, and the purpose of the readathon is to clear your shit before the next year starts. So read as much from your TBR as you can. The only rule of Clear Your Shit is that you can't buy books to fulfill the prompt. If you don't have a book that fulfills the prompt, then just randomize a book on your TBR, or just read any book on your TBR that you already own. It's fine. And so when I did my November TBR, I structured it using the first half of the prompts for Clear Your Shit. And the prompt, I think for the next episode of Shelve It or Scrap It, I make, because that's going to be the last 7 book episode that ties up July and August. Guys, I know I'm so far behind. Don't even worry about it. I'm in denial. You should be in denial too. It's absolutely fine. But I think for that one, I'm going to use like 7 of the Clear Your Shit prompts to pick my books. And when I made my November TBR, I knew obviously I'd be doing Shelve It or Scrap It. So where I didn't have a book already on my TBR to fulfill the prompt, I used things from the stacks. So I think the 3rd or 4th prompt for the readathon is to read a book that has like an intimidating figure or something like that in it. And for that, I picked Spells for Forgetting by Adrian Young. I think that this is a perfect autumnal read. And it's one of those where like if autumn and winter slip by without me reading it, then it puts it right back to the bottom of my priority list again, because I feel like the atmosphere of this really is going to lend itself well to this time of year. And I read the first chapter, and from what I can tell, it at least starts in October if it doesn't continue throughout the rest of October. But it's set on this island, and our main character wanted nothing more than to escape this island. She didn't want to be one of those people who stays on the island and never lives anywhere else, never experiences a life off this island. And she planned to leave with her boyfriend, her high school sweetheart, and they would start their new life in the big wide world. However, I'm pretty sure that he's accused of killing maybe her best friend, and so he leaves the island. I'm assuming he was kind of pushed off it a little bit, and the main character ended up staying. However, his mother has now died, and her last request was for her ashes to be buried on this island, and so he returns back. There is, I think, some sort of like folkloric magic within the island, but aside from that, it seems like a little bit more suspenseful. I don't know how much fantasy this is going to include. Like, to me, it seems more like a mystery of trying to figure out whether he killed the best friend or what it was exactly that happened to the best friend. But I do know that this was a fairy loot book. It was an adult fairy loot. I'm going to say 2023 at this point. September 2022. Damn, I've had this 3 years. That's insane because it doesn't feel like it. I'm ashamed of myself. But yeah, I know obviously it has some fantasy in it because it's a fairy loot edition. It's a very pretty one. I expect to enjoy this one, honestly hoping I don't love it because I don't want to shelve it. I don't want to extend this episode any longer. But I think because it is a standalone story, I'm expecting it to be atmospheric and it has that mystery plot line. I feel like it's the kind of book where I would read it, maybe enjoy it for what it is, and then feel no need to revisit it. So we'll see if I'm correct. Good morning. I have not had coffee yet. It's very important that you know that I'm fragile. Be gentle with me. I actually went to an appointment a couple of weeks ago before coffee, and they asked me my address. And I kind of just stared at them a little bit and was like, Why are you asking me such hard questions? Before I started my day, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about spells for forgetting because I have made it past the 100 page mark. I'm on page 112, which is chapter 18. And this is a multi-perspective book, which I did expect to some degree, but I didn't expect quite how many perspectives we were going to get in here. I thought that we would have the perspectives of the two main characters, which are of course Emery and August, but we also have a few more in here as well, including this guy who's also grown up on the island that Emery is dating, and her father is the next perspective that we're getting. So I'm quite into my cross stitch right now. It's all I really want to do, if I'm being honest. And then to be fair, I do it for extended periods of time and I'm like, ow, my wrist hurts. But last night I really just didn't want to hold a book and look at it with my eyeballs, so I put the audiobook for this on to give it a try. It's all right. I do like that it's multicast because we have so many perspectives. There is a narrator for every perspective that we have, which y'all know I love. I think that it is a book where you can listen to the audiobook. That is like a decent way to consume this book, but not any better necessarily than physically reading it. But I am, I think, going to continue to switch between the audio and the physical a little bit because I want to be doing things like I'm filming like a somewhat weekly vlog. I'm not, it's a themed vlog, so it won't have quite as much lifestyle as the structure is always the books, okay? If you only watch these vlogs and you want to know about the other ones, the structure is always the books. But if I have life things to talk about, then I do talk about them, or if I have things to show you that aren't book related, I will show you. This is still going to be very much themed, but obviously will maybe contain more life stuff than an episode of Shelve It or Scrap It does. So I was going to talk about this in that vlog, or maybe the vlog that follows, whatever that's going to be. But seasonal depression, man, and I'm struggling. I am struggling. It's very early in the year for me to be struggling. And the thing that frustrates me the most is that autumn and winter are my favorite seasons. I don't like spring or summer. So the irony of having to deal with seasonal depression in my favorite seasons is not lost on me. Like, I love that it's dark, that it's gloomy, that I can stay in and read, but I don't. And it's sad. So anyway, I want to kind of keep myself busy because if I sit and I stagnate and marinate in my own thoughts, it's not always good. So I will be switching between the audio and the physical of this for the remainder, aiming to finish it today because it's not a super long book. I've got like 250 pages left, which is significant, but I'm going to switch between reading and doing some work. But in terms of what this is about, it is pretty much what it says on the tin. You know what though, actually it's reminding me a lot of a book that I read for the last episode of Shelve It or Scrap It. Very different book, which is The Dry by Jane Harper, because we have this character who is returning to the small town where they grew up that they've essentially been run out of, and all of the townspeople are very against them. But the circumstances with which this boy left are a little bit different than I imagined, because I thought the reason that he left was because he had actually been run out of town. And there is an element of that, but essentially one night the orchard on the island set fire, and this is a tourist island, so every autumn tourists come in their droves to pick apples from this orchard, and there is some magic on the island that kind of like keeps the plants thriving. So these are like superior apples. The orchard actually belongs to this guy's family. He's called August Sol. It's a Sol orchard. And the same day, or like the morning after, a girl was found dead in the woods. And because this is such a small community, like all of the people who are of the same age all hang out together. So our main character Emery was best friends with this girl. Is she called Lily? Maybe. And then she was dating August, and then there was this other guy called, I don't want to call him Dust, but I feel like it is something like that. Dutch, not Dust. But he's like the other guy that makes up this like little foursome. So Emery was dating August and they were like madly in love with each other. But then he was cleared of the murder of this girl, even though everybody thinks that he did it. There's no proof that he did it. So him and his mother just like left, disappeared, and it kind of broke our main character even more than she was already broken at having her best friend be killed. So now, I don't know how many years it's been. I need to consult the synopsis, but he's come back to the island because his mother wanted her ashes buried there because it's where all of their family are buried. And so the townspeople are kind of allowing it because they loved his mother, even though they may have issues with him. And our female main character Emery is now dating Dutch, and Dutch wants to settle down, get married and have kids, and Emery's like, nah, I just can't really commit because her heart belongs to August. There's a lot of things like unspoken. She resents him a lot because he left her, didn't say where he went, didn't explain or let her know that he was leaving. And whether he killed Lily or not, I have no idea. Did a person kill Lily? Was it mysterious magical circumstances? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. The atmosphere is providing, I would say. And it's definitely more along the lines of a small town mystery than it is a fantasy right now. All of the women of this island are witches, which is where the magical element comes in. There is like a low-key magic tea shop on this island. It's just a regular tea shop, but they can bind charms into the herbs and stuff. Emery's family also have like a spell book, and they have like a herb book that lives in the tea shop and all of this kind of stuff, but it's very like contemporary, so it's like grounded in reality, because I realize the way that I'm saying magical tea shop makes it sound something akin to like the secret society of irregular witches, but no, this is very much like contemporary mystery with like realistic real world witchcraft. I am having a cozy desk night. You'd think that I wouldn't enjoy sitting here in the evening because I sit here like all day when I'm working and stuff, but I feel like I've found a new appreciation for it. Curtis is streaming. He's streaming Rock Band tonight. So I have him up in the background while I do some reading. And to be fair, he's not really playing music that lends itself well to reading, but I think that the speakers on my Mac are quite gentle. So it's not too much of an intrusive sound. And I feel like sitting at my desk helps me to focus a little bit. Not when I'm working, when I'm editing, focus is not my friend. But sitting here on an evening, I've actually been having quite a good time, and I'm still on a mission. I mean, it's past 10 p.m. now, so I should be going to bed soon. So is this going to happen? We'll see. But I am still on a mission to finish this book tonight. I'm on page 248, and it both reads quite quickly, but also is incredibly slow. It is atmospheric. I don't feel like I was locked into the story though, as I wanted to be. It is, as I said, predominantly a small town mystery. Up until this point, the magical element of this book has been very low key, very in the background. The island itself is almost sentient. We've had hints through perspectives of some of the older characters in the book that there is a level of magic within this world, that the people, like I said, the women of this island are all witches, and there's like this underlying message of there's something that the older characters have done. And because it's such a small community, even though we're mainly focusing on the younger characters of this town, like the 4 people who are of a similar age, it's also quite obvious that the older people, so their parents and of their generation, who are also a group that were very, very close for their entire lives, have also had a hand in this and are a little bit more involved in the magic. You get the sense from like the younger characters that they've all very much wanted to escape this community at some point in their lives, and because of that, the traditions of the island aren't necessarily dying, but they have less interest in it than previous generations. An example of this is that Emery runs her family tea shop, and they used to perform readings in the tea, like for the tourists, but also as part of the magic and the lore of this island, and that's something that Emery doesn't do and doesn't want to do. And we also have August, who was supposed to take over his family orchard, and that is something that he also had no interest in doing. So we do have a range of perspectives, predominantly focusing on Emery and August, but with some of those older perspectives creeping in now and again, forming an extra piece of the puzzle. Unless the magic is responsible for what happened to Lily, it is very much not anything that's at the forefront, and this at its core is a small town mystery. It does also remind me of the one Shea Earnshaw book that I've read, which was, is it Winterwood? I haven't read The Wicked Deep, but I do own it. You may have seen it in this video because it's shelved quite close to where the John Gwynne books are. I think it's on the shelf above. I believe that book is also set in the Pacific Northwest, which is a very atmospheric location for me because it reminds me of Twilight. That was the first media that I ever consumed set in this part of the world, and I do feel like you have all of the overbearing forest, the wildlife, and like you add a sense of magic to it, and it does become this quite like atmospheric location for stories of this nature. I believe that the Rachel Griffin book that I've read is also set in the Pacific Northwest, and I also really enjoyed the setting in that story as well. But I do think that this is coming together quite slowly. I feel like we're really dancing around what truly happened on this night where the orchard was set on fire and Lily did die. We are getting little pieces of the mystery, but I feel like it's not as intricate as is necessarily warranted for like a book of this size. I don't feel like there's enough happening to hold my attention in between these little nuggets of information about this one night that we're getting. This is a romantic story in that it heavily revolves around the relationship that Emery and August have and how she's always felt like a piece of her life has been missing since he left, and he has felt the same, and they have complex feelings. Like the reason why he left is partially tied to Emery, and the reason why she stayed is very much tied to August. And so there's a lot of like complex emotions surrounding each other and how that plays into this mystery. But I wouldn't say that romance is at the forefront either. Like I'm not feeling tension and longing in this relationship, even though it is very, very central to the story. So overall, like small town mystery vibes. I just don't feel like the mystery is enough to really hold this book together right now. I do really like the writing style though. I don't think I've read anything from Adrian Young before. I think I DNF Fable. I'm sure I had it for like an episode of Shelve It or Scrap It or something, but it's a mermaid story and I don't really like those. So I think I DNF'd it pretty early on, or I unhauled it without trying it. I know that Adrian Young has released more stories in this vein, which I'm definitely more interested in, but I think I expected this to be a little bit more gripping than it is turning out to be so far. I have just over 100 pages left, I think. Exactly. Oh, including the acknowledgements. Exactly 100 pages. In terms of story, it's 346 pages and I'm on page 248. And I do think that a lot can change in terms of my enjoyment in those last 100 pages because we haven't fully resolved the mystery yet. So depending on how that comes together, I feel like is going to decide how much I truly enjoy this book. But so far I'm having like an okay time with it, but it is in no means like blowing me away. So I have finished Spells for Forgetting and I did actually really enjoy how this came together in the end. I do think that it was still very slow going throughout the actual process of reading this book. My favorite thing about it was 100% the atmosphere created, especially with this island, like I said, in the Pacific Northwest. It felt very in line with other like similar stories I've read from similar locations, such as the book that I've read by Rachel Griffin. And I also have heard that all of Rachel Griffin's books are kind of in that vein. And this, I feel, is something that you would definitely enjoy if you're a fan of Rachel Griffin, and also potentially Shea Earnshaw, because it is also quite like the Shea Earnshaw book that I've read. I do think though, at its core, this is a small town mystery. The magical element is somewhat relevant to the story, but I also think that this book could have been a regular mystery without a magical element, and it pretty much would have still been the same story. The fantastical element truly is that minor. This is also a book that very much, like I said, centers on this romance and this relationship between August and Emery. That being said, I also feel like the romance is a very minor part of this. It's not a book that I would call a romance or a fantasy romance really in any regard, because that is also, while it's central to the plot, if you're somebody who's going into this wanting to read a romance or something romantic, I don't think that this really provides that. While I was finishing this up, actually I was thinking about the publishing industry and positioning in terms of marketing, because this to me is a book that feels very adjacent to like the Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James, which I read in the last episode of Shelve It or Scrap It, which is a mystery story. It's about a woman who was accused of killing, I think, 2 or 3 men, and she wasn't convicted of it, but she's agreed to tell her story to this woman who has a cold cases blog. And as that woman kind of investigates it and she goes to this woman's house, she finds like that the house is behaving very strangely and that there's some sort of entity within the house. So that is very much like a mystery or thriller novel with a paranormal element, but it is marketed towards like a thriller or mystery audience, whereas this is essentially the same thing. It's like a mystery story with a fantastical element, the fantastical element playing a very small part and the mystery being the main focus of the novel. But this has been positioned and targeted toward fantasy readers and published as a fantasy book in an adult fantasy subscription. So I did enjoy this one. I liked it a lot, especially the writing style, which would make me want to read more from Adrian Young, especially in this particular niche that she's been writing recently. I can't remember the titles of any of the books that she's written like along the same lines of this, because I think that this was the first of its kind that was published, but I do know that at least in terms of like cover design and marketing, she has written more books that are kind of being promoted in a similar way to this, so I would assume that they're along the same lines. I do think though, with this being dominantly a mystery story. It wasn't executed for me in a way that I look for within the mystery genre, if that makes sense. And I am definitely more of a thriller girl than a mystery for sure. But I feel like throughout the middle of this, the only thing that really kept me hanging on was the atmosphere and Adrian Young's writing. I didn't feel like we were getting enough pieces of the plot to really keep me hooked. And when it comes to this genre, it is the plot that is potentially driving me. And while this is quite a character-driven story in that we are following the relationship between August and Emery and the fact that they're still drawn to each other even after, I think, 15 years apart, because I think they're in their early 30s and August left when he was 18. In terms of that character work, maybe because this is a standalone book and we're mainly focused on the mystery, I felt the longing and the pull between them through the writing, but in terms of them as characters, like, I didn't feel like I was attached to either of them enough to truly be invested in that sense of longing and pining. So I've given this like a high 3-star rating. Let's call it a 3.5. I enjoyed a lot about it, but I think that I would like this type of book from Adrian Young to maybe lean more into the fantasy and the romance, or step up the plot if it is going to go more along the route of like a small town mystery or be more mystery focused than anything else. I would recommend this, especially if you are like a mystery reader, if you like atmospheric reads, but I would say just don't expect this to be overly fantastical or overly romantic, because I feel like you definitely would be disappointed. I went into this actually hoping it would be more of like a mystery story somewhat, and also the fact that this is an autumnal read, I was correct, this does take place over maybe, I think, just over a week in October, so I also think that this is the perfect time to read this one. But I do think this one is going to be a scrap for me. I did consider shelving it, but I don't think it's going to be one that I think about a great deal. While it was enjoyable in the moment, and I also don't see myself ever revisiting this one. If I wanted these vibes, I would, like I said, go on to read more from Adrian Young or Rachel Griffin or Shea Earnshaw. But if you also like those authors, then I think you'll like this story as well. So that does put a wrap on episode 20 of Shelve or Scrap It. So this was a mixed bag. We actually haven't made too much of a dent in the stacks. We are going to be ending this episode on, I think, 29 books, which, if my maths is correct, that means that we started this episode on 33. I actually can't remember. So we haven't made the biggest dent in the stacks, which is our dominant goal in this series, but we have dipped into other places. We've made a dent a little bit in my TBR, some newer books that I'd have acquired that eventually would have had to make their way onto the shelves or into the stacks anyway. And then we've also cleared off I say cleared off 3 books that have been on my own TBR and on my shelf for a very, very long time. One of them we shelved, 2 of them we've scrapped. So let's talk about it. So in terms of the books that I read for this vlog, 7 were attempted. And you know what, actually, I feel like in more recent episodes, even though the amount of books that I'm reading per episode is constantly increasing and is more than it ever used to be, I feel like I'm DNFing less and less, because of the 7 books that we attempted for this one, only 2 of them were DNFs. I made it a great deal of the way through Firstborn of the Sun before I just realized I wasn't really in the headspace to be tackling this one right now. It wasn't working for me. And Seraphina, I dipped my toes into and figured that the writing style just really wasn't going to work out for me. And then the other 5 books are ones that we completed. Of those 7 books, we are going to be scrapping 5 of them. And technically we are going to be shelving 2, but like with the last episode, this is a book that was on the shelves and went back onto the shelves. So for the sake of the statistics of this project, I'm not going to be counting this as a shelve because it started and ended in the same place. But we did manage to get one of my most recent purchases onto the shelves. On top of the books that we attempted, there were an additional 3 books resolved in this video. 2 of them were shelved after I decided to unhaul books that started this episode already on the shelves. And then we just have 1 extra scrap, as this is a companion novel to the Seraphina duology. And if I don't like Seraphina, I'm probably not going to be prioritizing this anytime in the future. So it may as well hit the scrap pile as well. So that is 10 books, I guess, resolved for this vlog in total. Like I said, we haven't made too much of a dent in the stacks because 2 of them came from my more recent TBR, books that I'd hauled that would have ended up in the stacks. 3 of the books that I read came from the shelves and 1 of them ended up right back on there. And then we just have the 4 books that came from the stacks for episode 20. I am still low-key annoyed that I could only get this on the shelves when I unhaul Test of the Road and Serafina, because I have so many small gaps on those shelves now, which are just a little bit too small to actually get a book onto. But hopefully we will resolve that in the future. For episode 21, I think I am going to be going with some prompts from Clear Your Shit. The thing that I really like about the Clear Your Shit prompts is that they give me a little bit of direction, but they're also super vague, like they're not supposed to be difficult, which is why I enjoy participating in this readathon throughout the end of the year, because it's truly not hard. Like the point is to read the books on your TBR, not to like bend over backwards to make a book fit a prompt. So I really like that about this readathon, and I think it will be a perfect way to give me, like I said, a little bit of direction, but without boxing me in too much, which is fine. And episode 21 will be the final episode resolving my summer of hauling in July and August. I was real good in September, guys, but when we come to resolve in October, I don't even want to talk about it if I'm being honest. But that does wrap up episode 20. But for the next vlog on my channel that isn't Shelve It or Scrap It, I'm going to be reading 3 brand new November releases, so keep your eyes peeled for that if you are at all interested. So I do hope you've enjoyed this one. If you've made it this far, are we going to get it under 2 hours for once? Fingers crossed. Please don't forget to like this video if you did like it, and subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you're go and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.